Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today we are going to talk about my top 10 books of 2025 so far. Honestly, I have had so many incredible reads in the first half of 2025. It was actually kind of hard to narrow this list down. And I'm going to say right away that this is not ranked in any way, shape, or form. You're going to have to wait till the end of 2025 to get an official ranked top 10 video. So far in 2025, I have read 47 books, which is neither here nor there. It really doesn't matter, other than it gives you an idea of the ratio that these 10 books I'm going to show you represent. The first book is The Curse of Shallion by Lois McMaster Bujold. I'm sure a lot of these books are not going to come as a surprise for those of you that have been following my channel for the last 6-7 months, but Curse of Shallion is a book that's been on my TBR for a really long time. It's been highly recommended to me by some close friends of mine here in the bookish community, and it was my first time reading Bujold anything, and let me tell you what, this was an entrance. This book, first of all, I'm not a prose person, typically. I do like good prose, but it's not going to make or break a book for me. Bujold's prose made me stop and take notice, and that doesn't happen for me as much, I think, as it does for a lot of other fantasy fans who really put a lot of stock in how the prose makes them feel and immerses them in the world, which is awesome. That's just not typically how I approach reading. However, every once in a while I will come across a book like this one that really makes me stop and savor and go back and read a line again and pull out an extra prose tab from my annotations. So Curse of Shallion is book 1 in a trilogy called The World of the Five Gods. However, it is a standalone story. Each of the stories in the trilogy are loosely linked together through some secondary characters. So Curse of Shallion follows a mentor character, which was the first thing I loved about it, because Kazaril is the kind of mentor character that I think all of us know and love in a way, but puts everything about the story through his eyes. And we have a little bit of a coming of age journey through the young royals in this story, but really the heart of Curse of Shallion is Kazaril and his self-sacrifice and his loyalty and the way that he works so hard to try to protect the people that he is duty-bound to protect. And right away when this book starts, I knew we were in for a dark undertone, because the magic in this world has to do with a lot of supernatural elements. There's death magic involved. There's a scene right away at the beginning that kind of sets the tone of how dark this story can get. But on top of that, it never loses its light. There's a through line of hope and bravery and purpose through this entire novel that never allows those dark undertones to flood the immersion of this story, which is something I really appreciated about it. I actually buddy read Curse of Shallion with some friends of mine here on BookTube, and I would love to have you guys go watch our discussion about it after you read the book. We all do have some non-spoiler overview thoughts at the beginning of the video if you want to see those, and I'll link that up above. But Curse of Shallion was an easy pick for me for this list because it really came out as a surprise for me. Not that I didn't think I would love it, but I didn't know what to expect, and this blew away all of my non-expectations, if that makes sense. And I really look forward to reading more Bujold. I have purchased more books of hers since reading this one because I love her style. Her world building is immaculate. There's so many things to love about this book, and I hope that if you haven't already, you give Curse of Shallion a chance. Next up, we're going to dip very gently into the mystery and thriller genre, which is something that I've been experimenting with a little bit in the last 6 to 8 months because I really hadn't had a lot of experience in this genre, and I decided to take a couple tiptoe steps into it to see if I could find out what I like and dislike within that genre. And I ended up stumbling upon a Japanese author named Keigo Higashino. And the first book I read of his was called Malice, and I read that, I believe, earlier this year. And then I picked up Newcomer. This is the second book that I've read in his Detective Kaga series. He has a couple of different detective series, each one following a kind of central detective character. And I read 2 books by this author and immediately purchased a whole bunch more. Something that I was looking for within mystery and thriller, because I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the genre as a whole, I didn't want anything that was gonna leave me with horrible nightmares. I'm not a big fan of grotesque body horror, that kind of thing. And especially when mystery thriller starts leaning too far towards the horror genre, I really start backing away quickly. But this is such a perfect gateway for me as a reader into mystery and thriller, because while Higashino does not back down from the seriousness and the horrible aspects of a crime like murder, he also really gives it a character focus on everyone around the murders. It's not so focused on the nitty-gritty details. While Detective Kaga is the backbone of these novels, he takes a bit of a backseat at the beginning of the books. He did in Malice, and he did here in Newcomer, where we're allowed to be brought into this location, we're allowed to meet some of the players, and then slowly Detective Kaga will make his entrance once we've had a little bit of a chance to settle in. And this one takes place in a small town community feel within Tokyo. It's a smaller precinct where there's a bunch of people that have known each other for a long time, people that have owned these little shops for ages. They're trying to figure out how to keep up with modern times and modern shoppers. Some of them don't care. And we're introduced to a whole bunch of different families around the area where the murder takes place. When Detective Kaga finally does subtly enter the scene, he goes around and he solves smaller mysteries for each of the families involved in the story, as we're building up to finding out what actually happened to the murder victim that he's originally been placed there for. I loved this. The small town community feel of this book was so beautiful. The way that he wove in this incredibly immersive flavor of the shops and the families, and each one had its own feel to it, and you could immediately see these human struggles that all of these characters are dealing with. Detective Kaga is honestly as much of a therapist as he is a detective, which does get him into trouble a little bit sometimes. But I cannot get enough of Higashino's writing. I cannot get enough of the way that he approaches mystery and thriller. And this is only my second book by him, but I can tell you there will be a whole lot more coming in the future, and I hope you give him a try as well. It's time for me to talk about Terry Pratchett. So, as you guys know, I have been falling deeper and deeper and deeper in love with his City Watch series, which is within his larger Discworld universe. And this is book 5 of the City Watch series. I have read through book 6 since the beginning of 2024. And I think at this point, Fifth Elephant has to be my second favorite of the City Watch. I absolutely loved this book. So in general, if you haven't read anything in the City Watch yet, it is Terry Pratchett's very beautifully messy human fantasy world that deals with relatable human experiences in a way that doesn't ever look down at the reader. It honestly just invites a conversation, and I love it so much. And it's infused with that beautiful British humor, and it's just lovely. He knows fantasy well enough to be able to make fun of it in an intelligent way. And Fifth Elephant follows some of our favorite characters from the series as they take a trip to an area inspired very heavily by Transylvania. And so we have some werewolves, we have some vampires happening, but it's got the Terry Pratchett twist, of course, on absolutely everything. There's a relationship in this story that just fills me with so much wholesome warmth that we've built throughout the series thus far. I loved the plotline in this one. I loved a lot of the side characters that we get introduced to. And honestly, the motley crew of this series brings me so much joy that I cannot wait. I cannot wait to go back and reread these books as soon as I'm done with the series, because I know that these are going to be foundational favorites for me for the rest of my life, and I cannot wait to reread them. I definitely want to do a series overview video once I finish the last 2 books of the series. We're getting so close. But I'm also trying to take my time and savor each one, because I know that the minute I finish the last page of that 8th City Watch book, there's going to be a bittersweet moment for me where I realize that I will never be able to read a City Watch book for the first time again. And it's really depressing and beautiful all at the same time. You guys who have fallen in love with big series, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Book 5 in the City Watch series, I absolutely loved it. I would recommend this series so highly. And I have been doing that ad nauseum. I'm sure you guys are all sick of me talking about City Watch at this point this year. But I'm not going to stop because I love it and it's my channel, so I can do what I want. Next up is The Company by K.J. Parker. This is my first K.J. Parker read, and it is a standalone. And it's not so much traditional fantasy sword and sorcery vibes as it is a alternate history. It's set in a world that technically doesn't exist, inspired by certain areas of our world, but it really focuses in on a deep, layered character exploration, which is why I love it so much. And in this story, we have a squad of men who were the elite in their military unit. They were the front men. They were the one charging the enemy on the front lines, and they gained a pretty massive reputation amongst the army and beyond. And now that they've retired, they're having a little bit of a hard time fitting back into normal society, until Kunessen, who was their kind of de facto leader, tells them that he has a plan. He comes and kind of collects them, and he tells them that he's going to bring them all to this island that he has purchased. He has found all of the things that they could possibly need to start their own little community on this island away from everyone else, and it's getting the band back together, and it's gonna be the best thing, and that's really where they're meant to be. However, things don't go exactly the way that Kunessen plans them. There is a dark, sinister undertone to this book that I absolutely love. And as the layers are revealed and the history of this squad slowly comes to light throughout the story, it just digs you in deeper and deeper and deeper until you can't stand not knowing what's going to happen next. I could not put this book down. The prose is also something that I really loved about this book. And I will admit that I didn't actually know how I felt about this story when I first started reading it. It took me a little bit to really sink into what Parker was trying to do here and commit fully to the story that was being told. But once I did, it really dawned on me how much of a masterpiece this book is. I absolutely loved this, and I highly recommend it. And if you guys are looking for darker tone alternative history and you're not that fussed about having like massive magic in your fantasy books, I would highly recommend this. Next up is Lisa Sees the Island of Sea Women. This is a historical fiction set before, during, and after the Korean War, and it shows the story of a group of women who were divers on Jeju Island outside of Korea, and their traditions, their families, their hopes and dreams, the struggles that they have, the horrible things that happen to them, their families, and their communities because of the war and the aftermath and the colonization, all of that. This is a dark book. It's the cover is absolutely beautiful, but inside there is a lot of incredibly heavy, hard to read content. But through the whole thing, the story of the resilience of these women and the incredible journey that they live through, all of that is just really unputdownable. One of the things that I love about Lisa C's work is that in each of her books, and I've read 3 or 4 of them at this point, she picks a female-female relationship to focus on. Mother-daughter, sister-sister, or in this case, 2 very close friends, going from their early years as young teenagers all the way up to the lifetime, basically, of both of them. And man, can this woman tell a generational story like nobody else I've ever come across. She will bring these characters to life so deeply and so vibrantly that they feel like you're walking alongside them through their lives, and you can't help but root for them and be in the moment with them, no matter if it's something that's horrible or a joy or anything. Like, it's just brilliantly written, and I love her historical fiction so much. I recommend her very highly to everyone who wants to read historical fiction. This one was probably the hardest to read of the ones that I have read of hers so far. So I definitely want to encourage anybody who wants to try this, please do. It's incredible. And also go into it knowing that there's a lot of content in this book that might be hard to read. Not to say you shouldn't. It's a very heavy story, and I think it brings to light a lot of parts of the Korean War that unfortunately don't get talked about nearly enough. Next up is one of my biggest surprises of 2025, and I did a whole video review on it that you can go watch if you would like to, and that is Doohickey by Stephen King. Now, I don't intend this to be the beginning of my Stephen King era. I'm not looking to read a whole bunch of his work or anything like that, but I had asked my good friend Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, all right, if there's a King book that you think I'm actually going to have the best chance of 5-starring, having a great experience with it, what would you recommend? And he knows my reading tastes pretty well at this point, and he said, hands down, Doohickey. So I said, okay, and I read it. And first of all, like I've said in other videos, Andrew was 100% spot on. This is a slow burn story that focuses on themes of grief and loss and the fracturing of a family, a fracturing of identity. We all have these moments in life where something happens external to us that we don't have any control over. How does it change us? How does it adjust the path that we are on in life? And those are the themes that we start with. It's deceptively slice of life at the beginning of this book, really for the first half, because we're walking alongside a man who has had a terrible injury, and he's learning to rediscover who he is as a person with these disabilities now, and he is told to separate himself geographically from the incident, and he goes and stays in a house on a Florida key called the Big Pink, and he starts getting back into art, or getting into art for the first time. And then things start to get really weird, because it's a Stephen King novel. And I don't want to say too much about the weird parts of this book, because I really think that going into it super blind and just allowing those elements of the story to be revealed as I was reading it are definitely the way to go when reading this book. But the characters were so real. I never doubted for a second that these characters really lived throughout the entire book. And I think that's a really special skill set when an author is able to create such a strong, deeply nuanced fictional character that they do come off the page. There's a difference between, oh, I really like that character, and I feel like this character was real. One of my favorite characters of 2025 is in this book, Wireman, for everybody who's read it. And if you haven't, have fun meeting him. He's the friend that everybody needs in their life. With all of his flaws, he is an incredible character, and just, I absolutely loved him. Doohickey really surprised me. I didn't have 5-starring a Stephen King novel on my 2025 bingo card, but here we are. Next up, we're going to talk about 2 memoirs that I've read this year that I really loved. Is a tough word to use with memoirs like this, because I don't love the content. The things that these people went through were horrible and really hard, and also they're brilliant tales of human survival, and I respect both of the subjects of these books immensely. The first one that I want to talk about is All the Gallant Men by Donald Stratton. He was a survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack in 1941 and of the capsized ship, the USS Arizona. One of the things that I really appreciated about this book, I've read quite a few military history, military memoirs, military historical fiction books at this point, and this is a great gateway memoir for people that are interested in reading a a little bit more about that time period and the experience of a sailor who was right in the thick of everything during the attack on Pearl Harbor. He gives you enough military details so that you can see what's happening and visualize what's going on, but he doesn't overburden the story with those details. It doesn't feel like you're reading military coordinates the whole time, if that makes sense. And he really gives this raw honesty to his telling of his story and his surviving of this horrible attack in a way that I think is really approachable, but it also respects his experiences and the experiences of those who survived with him and those who did not. Highly recommend this as a Pearl Harbor memoir, just a military memoir in general, honestly. I had this on my TBR for a long time, and it honestly makes me mad it took me as long as it did to read it, because it is absolutely as fabulous as I thought it was going to be, and just huge respect to Donald Stratton for sharing his story and leaving us with this memoir so that more people can understand what he went through and the other survivors of Pearl Harbor. There's a very important conversation, I feel, to be had around boundaries when it comes to stories of these survivors being shared on a global level, and some of that is addressed in the other memoir that I read this year, Escape from Camp 14. This book is written by Blaine Harden, but it is the story of a man named Shin Dong-hyuk from North Korea and his incredible journey escaping from a North Korean prison. His story is different from other North Korean memoirs that I've read because he was actually born within that North Korean prison. He knew nothing else until his escape, which was kind of miraculous. It wasn't kind of, it was incredibly miraculous, the way that everything happens, and you'll just have to read the book to know what I mean. But this is an incredible memoir, you guys, and I've read other memoirs by North Korean escapees, like The Girl with Seven Names, that I've recommended to pretty much everybody, and also Every Falling Star by Sung-Ju Lee. I think both of those are also incredible. This one, I think, delves a little bit more into Shin Dong-hyuk's aftermath in terms of him finding his identity, because he's coming from a different starting point than a lot of his fellow North Korean escapees in terms of his situation, just born and growing up within the prison. And this novel definitely introduces some interesting commentary on what happens when a survivor's tale goes global and it becomes something that almost appears to be owned by the whole world, and what kind of boundaries are lost or ignored with those survivors being able to go through their own healing at whatever pace they need to while the world is watching them. And I appreciated that this book digs into that a little bit, because I do think that that's an important conversation to have. So anyways, also highly recommend Escape from Camp 14. Next up, to absolutely no one's surprise, I'm going to hold up A Haunt for Jackals by J.L. Odom. This is book 2 in her Land of Exile trilogy, and I was lucky enough to read an advanced review copy of this before it came out in February this year. I love this series, you guys. This quintessentially is so much of what I love about epic fantasy in a book. It has a little flavor of alternate history. It's not as big, flashy sword and sorcery as a lot of other series are. It is deeply character driven, and J.L. Odom does something in book 1 with a character that I don't think I have ever seen another author pull off in terms of character reveal, and just, she's brilliant for that character arc in book 1. And I was very nervous, as I'm sure all are, when we really love a book 1 and then we turn to book 2 and we wonder, is it going to be as good? Is it going to continue that high that I'm on from book one? And I have to say that she really knocked it out of the park with book two. It continues to build and expand on the character arcs that I loved so much in book one. It deepens those characters. We get a growing sense of tension from the overall conflict. And as always, her experience as a veteran with military operations and translating and linguistics and just cultural dynamics shines through in such an incredible way, especially in book two. It started in book one. I got a lot of that in book one. Book two just continues to build more and more and more of the world and show us the intricacies between all of the different groups of people, the factions, the tribes, everybody that's involved. And I am so madly in love with a couple of the characters from this series. They're amazing. Book one follows a man named Azetla, he's part of a military squad, but he's an outsider. His people are oppressed and they are subjugated by a different nation. He's kind of worked his way up to a position of not power per se, but influence, subtle influence that he can't be too overt about because of the people that he comes from and the prejudices that the surrounding culture has toward him. J.L. Odom tackles themes that I think are quite common in a lot of fantasy right now, but she does it in a way that it's not a bludgeon. She's never beating you over the head with the themes that she's exploring. She's inviting a conversation. And that's something that I appreciate so much because I do feel like a lot of authors don't know how to handle those themes in a way that doesn't immediately bring forward the author's opinion of how we should feel about them or what we should think. And J.L. Odom really just lays out the characters, lays out their world, lays out the story that's happening, and invites us to walk alongside. And I love it so much. So, if you haven't picked up these books yet, on my recommendation, please do so if they sound interesting to you. I will never stop shouting this book from the rooftops. I love it so much. I love book one, love book two, and I no longer have the fear about book three that is it going to be as good as the first two, because I trust J.L. Odom so much as a writer at this point that I just can't wait for it to come out to be an absolutely banger ending to this already amazing trilogy. And last but not least on my top 10 of 2025 so far is the book that made me the most emotional this year, and that is The Housekeeper and the Professor. This book, I've said it in a couple videos already, so in brief, my grandfather is in mid-stage Alzheimer's and he was moved into a memory care facility in the last month or two. And it's been a really hard transition for him. It's been a really hard transition for us as a family, and we are navigating a lot of really tough things altogether. And I didn't know when I picked up this book that it was going to be the perfect time for me to read it. This is a translated Japanese novel by Yoko Ogawa about a young single mother who is hired on as a housekeeper for an elderly man who used to be a professor. And when she goes to meet him, she finds out that his memory resets every 80 minutes. And he walks around in this suit with little notes pinned all over it so that he can remember important things about the people and events and objects in his life. And the relationship that grows between the housekeeper, the professor, and the housekeeper's son is such a beautiful story of human dignity and the value of life, meeting people where they're at despite their circumstances. With my experience set aside, this is just a beautiful story. It's a beautiful human story. It is definitely something that I think a lot of people would resonate with in different ways. This has such a gentle, simplistic, straightforward way of telling a beautiful story that I love about many of the modern Japanese translated novels that I've read. and she tells the story in such a beautiful way. There's a lot of mathematics involved, which, you guys, if I'm telling you that I loved a book that included mathematics and even some mathematical equations within the story, please know that is about the highest compliment I can possibly give a book. So anyways, I absolutely loved this book. I hope that if you guys decide to pick it up, that it gives you a beautiful insight into humanity and life as it did me. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So that is my list of the top 10 books I have read so far in 2025, and I would love for you to go down in the comments below and let me know what your top 10 or top 5 or favorite, whatever you want to share, of 2025 so far is with me, because I love seeing you guys' lists, and I add way too many books to my TBR every time you guys tell me about what you're reading, so please don't forget to do that. If you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe, and check out my description box for links to all of my social media platforms, my website, my books if you're interested in checking them out. And I just wanted to say another huge thank you, you guys. This has been a great year so far for reading. I can't wait to see what the second half of 2025 has in store for us. And I look forward to hearing more about your adventures in reading down in the comments. So I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you are reading some 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.